The helicopter doesn't have doors. That detail hits you every time. MH6 Little Birds were never designed for comfort. They were designed for speed, for invisibility, for the kind of insertion that gives a target exactly 0 seconds to prepare. You are sitting on an external bench pod at 140 knots, 200 feet above the Afghan desert, and the air is so cold at this altitude that your exposed skin feels like it's being peeled back layer by layer. Your HK-416 is pressed against your chest. Your night vision turns the world a pale, luminous green. Below you, a compound sits dark and quiet in the Paktia province. Mud-walled and unremarkable, the kind of structure that appears 10,000 times across this country and means nothing until signals intelligence, 6 weeks of surveillance, and 2 corroborating sources confirmed that the man sleeping inside it coordinated an attack that killed 11 people at a marketplace in Kabul. You have rehearsed this breach 43 times. In 4 seconds, you will do it once for real. The little bird flares, you drop. But you didn't start here. Nobody starts here. You are 22 years old and you are standing in the dirt at Fort Benning, Georgia at 0430 on a Tuesday morning in October. You have been in the Army for 3 years. You passed basic combat training, advanced individual training, and Ranger indoctrination, and you wear the tan beret of the 75th Ranger Regiment, which most soldiers spend entire careers trying to earn and never do. You thought the Ranger tab meant you had arrived somewhere. You were beginning to understand that it only meant you were qualified to stand at the starting line of something else entirely. Word travels inside the regiment the way all important information travels in close military communities, quietly, selectively, through conversations that happen in parking lots and weight rooms rather than briefing rooms. Operators, the unit, the guys whose faces you never quite see clearly, who move through Fort Bragg like they belong to a different physics than everyone else. Men who came from Ranger battalions and Green Beret teams and who one day simply weren't there anymore, absorbed into something that didn't announce itself. You heard the stories, you filed them away. Then came your 3rd deployment to Afghanistan, 12 months in Kunar province, running direct action raids with your Ranger platoon, hitting targets faster than most conventional units could plan a single mission. You were good. You knew you were good. But on the last operation of that rotation, a night raid on a Taliban logistics hub in the Korangal Valley, you watched a 4-man element move through a compound with a precision that made your entire platoon's work look like a rough draft. They cleared 4 rooms in under 20 seconds. No wasted movement, no hesitation, no noise beyond what the mission required. When it was over, one of them looked at you across the courtyard. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. 3 weeks after you rotated home, a man in civilian clothes found you at a diner outside Fort Benning. He ordered coffee. He asked about your background with the kind of sequenced, casual precision that you recognized as assessment rather than conversation. He didn't mention a unit name. He didn't have to. He told you there was a selection course, that attendance was voluntary, that roughly 90% of candidates who attempted it would fail, and that failure was not a reflection of inadequacy, because the men who ran it were not looking for the strongest or the fastest or the most decorated. They were looking for something that couldn't be tested in a gym or measured on a shooting range, something that only became visible when everything else had been stripped away. He slid a card across the table with a phone number on it. You sat with that card for 5 days. You thought about what you were, a Ranger, 22 years old, 3 deployments, a career that most people would call exceptional and that you were beginning to understand was a ceiling rather than a summit. You called the number on the 5th day. A voice told you to report to Camp Dawson, West Virginia in 30 days. It told you to bring your military gear, your boots, and the ability to navigate terrain alone at night. It told you nothing else. You said, understood. You spent the next 30 days running mountains with a weighted ruck every morning before anyone else was awake. And in those early hours before the base came to life, you began to understand that you were not preparing your body. Your body was already prepared. You were preparing something else. The part of you that would still be moving at hour 14 of a 40-mile navigation course when every rational signal your nervous system could generate was telling you that the reasonable thing to do is stop.
You were preparing your answer to that signal. You arrive at Camp Dawson in late autumn. The Appalachian mountains have gone gray and brown, stripped down to their bones, and the cold has the specific quality of cold that doesn't arrive gradually. It is simply there, present in every breath, every piece of exposed skin, every moment you are not moving fast enough to generate your own heat. There are other candidates. You don't know how many. You will never be told. This is the first lesson, delivered without words. Comparison is a tool you no longer have access to. There are no scoreboards, no rankings, no feedback from the cadre who observe everything and confirm nothing. You cannot look sideways and calibrate yourself against someone else's performance, because the only performance being measured is yours, and the only standard is one that has not been shared with you. This is deliberate. Uncertainty is the primary instrument of Delta Force selection. The cadre are not trying to find men who perform well when they know the rules. They are finding men who perform when there are no rules visible, when the finish line is hidden, when effort produces no confirming signal whatsoever. The Army is full of men who work hard when they can see the reward. Delta needs the men who work hard when they cannot. The first days are physical. Ruck marches that begin before dawn and end after dark, distances that are never announced in advance, time standards that are never posted. You are simply given a start point and an end point and expected to arrive. The weight on your back is 65 pounds. The terrain is everything the Appalachians have to offer. Ridge climbs, creek crossings, dense forest with no maintained trail, elevation changes that punish the knees coming down as badly as they punish the lungs going up. You learn on day 3 that the physical component is not the test. The physical component is the delivery mechanism for the actual test, which is the conversation your mind has with itself when the body is past comfortable and pushing into a zone where quitting becomes a vocabulary your brain begins to construct sentences in. The question selection is asking is not whether you can carry 65 pounds over 40 miles of mountain terrain. The question is, when your mind begins speaking the language of quitting, what do you say back?
Some candidates answer wrong. You watch them sit down on the trail at hour 10, hour 12, hour 15. They don't announce their decision. They simply stop moving, and the stopping is the announcement. Nobody approaches them. Nobody argues with them. They have answered the question honestly, and the cadre have recorded the answer. A vehicle arrives eventually and takes them away, and the next morning their cot is empty and their name is not spoken, and the column moves out without the gap they left being acknowledged in any way. This is the loneliest thing you have ever experienced, not because of the physical isolation, but because you are inside your own head for 12 and 14 and 16 hours at a stretch with no external input whatsoever. And the inside of your head, under those conditions, is not a comfortable place to be for that long. Old decisions surface, things you could have done differently, faces of people you let down, the specific weight of every moment in your life when you chose the easier path. Selection doesn't create these thoughts. It simply removes every distraction you normally use to avoid them. You keep moving. The land navigation phase begins on day 7. You are handed a map, a compass, a list of grid coordinates, and nothing else. No GPS, no partner, no timeline. You will navigate 40 miles of mountain terrain alone, locating checkpoints that are marked on no civilian map, and you will do it in a window of time that you are not told. You simply move until you have found every point, or until you cannot move anymore. You start before dawn. By hour 4, your legs have found their rhythm, the mechanical repetition of movement that stops requiring conscious effort and becomes simply the default state of your body in motion. You read terrain the way your ranger training taught you to, contour lines translating into 3-dimensional landscape in your mind, drainage patterns indicating valley floors, ridge saddles providing route options that save elevation gain. You are good at this. You have always been good at this. By hour 9, the rhythm has broken down.
Your left knee is complaining in a specific high-pitched register that you know from experience is the tendon rather than the joint, which means it can be pushed further but will require attention afterward. Your lower back has tightened into a brace. The ruck straps have worn channels into your shoulders that you stopped feeling around hour 6, which means the nerve endings in those areas have simply stopped reporting, which is its own kind of information. By hour 12, you are operating in a mode that has no name in training manuals. It is the state that exists on the other side of the decision to continue, after the debate has ended, after the body's arguments have been heard and overruled, and the conversation between your mind and your legs has been reduced to a single sentence repeated without variation. One more step. One more step. One more step. You find the final checkpoint at hour 17. You stand at the marker in the dark, and the silence is total, and you feel nothing that resembles triumph, only the specific blankness that follows extended effort, the stillness of a machine that has been running at maximum output and is now idling. You don't know if you passed. Nobody tells you. The psychological assessments happen on day 12. A man in civilian clothes sits across from you in a room with 2 chairs and fluorescent lighting that makes everything look slightly medical. He does not introduce himself. He begins asking questions. Not tactical questions, not military questions. Questions about your father, about a decision you made at 17 that you have not thought about in years, about the last time you were genuinely afraid and what you did with the fear, about your definition of loyalty and whether it has ever conflicted with your definition of integrity and which one you chose when it did. He is not looking for correct answers. He is watching how you construct yourself under observation, whether the architecture holds under pressure, whether the person you present in professional contexts and the person who exists underneath that presentation are coherent, or whether the gap between them is wide enough to become a liability in conditions where your judgment is the only thing standing between a mission succeeding and people dying. You answer without editing yourself. You are too tired to perform. 3 weeks after you leave Camp Dawson, a letter arrives at your unit. You have been selected for the operator training course. You read it twice, then you fold it and put it in your pocket and finish your lunch and don't tell anyone, because the first thing selection teaches you is that the things that matter most are the things you carry quietly. OTC runs 6 months and it will rebuild you from the cellular level. Not physically. Physically, you are already where you need to be. OTC rebuilds the software, the decision architecture, the way violence is organized and executed and thought about in the space between intention and action. The first month is marksmanship. You shoot every day. You shoot at distances from 5 meters to 1,000. You shoot moving. You shoot from awkward positions. You shoot after sprinting. You shoot after being underwater. You shoot until the mechanics of accurate fire are no longer a skill you exercise, but a physical grammar you speak without thinking about conjugation. By the end of the first month, you can place rounds on a target at 300 meters from a standing, unsupported position with a consistency that would have seemed impossible to you 18 months ago, and the instructors treat this as the baseline from which actual training begins. The second month is CQB. Close quarters battle at the level Delta Force operates is an entirely different discipline than the room-clearing doctrine taught in Ranger School or even in advanced infantry training. It is not about aggression or speed in isolation. It is about the geometric solution to a 3-dimensional problem. A room is not a room. A room is a volume of space.
Containing lines of fire, angles of approach, points of domination, and an unknown number of threats positioned at unknown points within it. Your job, in the fraction of a second between entering and clearing, is to solve the geometry. You run the shoot house hundreds of times, live fire. Every round you fire could kill the role player standing 12 inches from the target if your solution is wrong. This is not abstract. This is the condition under which you train, because the condition under which you will operate is identical, and the margin for error in both cases is the same, which is 0. You fail scenarios. Not many, but you fail them, and the failure is documented, and you sit in debrief rooms, and you dissect exactly what decision you made, and exactly when you made it, and exactly why it was wrong. There is no softening of this. There is no encouragement layered around the critique. The debrief is precise and it is blunt, and it is the most useful educational experience of your life, because every mistake you make in the shoot house is a mistake you have been shown how not to make in the compound. The third month introduces surveillance and what the unit calls the softer skills, which is a description that misleads. Surveillance means learning to exist invisibly inside a hostile environment. You study how people move in cities, the specific rhythms of foot traffic, the tells that distinguish a surveillance team from a crowd, the counter-surveillance routes that allow you to determine whether you are being followed before you approach anything sensitive. You learn disguise. Not costumes, behavioral disguise, the way posture and pace and eye behavior communicate identity and intent to anyone trained to read them, and how to adjust those signals to become the person the environment expects to see rather than the person you are. The fourth month is advanced weapons and breaching. You learn every method of defeating a door: explosive breaching with det cord and cutting charges, ballistic breaching with specialized rounds that destroy hinges and locks without overpenetration, mechanical breaching with rams and halogen bars. And you learn the tactical logic that determines which method applies to which situation. A quiet approach calls for a different solution than a dynamic entry requiring disorientation. A reinforced steel door requires different tools than a hollow core interior door. The wrong choice costs seconds you don't have. The fifth month is mission planning. You sit in rooms with maps and satellite imagery and intelligence packages, and you build operations from scratch. You identify objectives, plan routes, account for contingencies, coordinate supporting elements, and then you execute the plan in a training environment that introduces variance and friction at the precise moments your plan assumed it would not exist. Because plans don't survive contact with reality, and the only thing that does is the judgment you developed in the months before contact. The sixth month is integration. Full mission profiles run continuously. Target packages arrive with hours of preparation time. You move from planning to execution and debrief and back to planning inside the same 24-hour cycle. Sleep becomes a resource you manage rather than an experience you have. You function because your training has made function the default rather than the choice. At the end of 6 months, you stand in a room with the men who ran your OTC. One of them pins a unit crest to your chest. He doesn't make a speech. He doesn't need to. You are a Delta Force operator. You are a Sergeant E5 and the most dangerous and capable and simultaneously the least experienced person in the building. Both of those things are equally true. The team room smells like gun oil and coffee and the specific institutional cleaner that every military facility on Earth uses and that you will associate with this life for as long as you live. Your assault troop is 40 men, organized into smaller assault teams of 4 to 6 operators each. You are placed in a team led by a staff sergeant named Reyes, who has 7 years in the unit and the physical economy of movement that marks every experienced operator. Nothing wasted, everything purposeful. A body that has learned to conserve energy the way a long-distance runner conserves oxygen. He shakes your hand once on your first day. He does not welcome you. He does not explain expectations. He points to your workstation and tells you that training begins at 0600 and that you should bring everything you have, because what the team needs from you is everything you have and then the part past that. You understand. The training cycle is relentless. Live fire CQB 3 days a week in the unit's own shoot houses, which are more sophisticated than any training facility you have used before. Reconfigurable walls, remote-controlled target systems, environmental controls that can introduce smoke, reduced lighting, or sound to simulate specific operational conditions.
You run drills until the movement through a doorway is as automatic as breathing, until your eyes clear a corner before your brain has consciously directed them to, until the communication between you and your teammates during a breach has been compressed from words to sounds to silence, each man knowing without signal where the others are and what they are doing. The long-range shooting continues. The unit's range extends to 1,000 meters and beyond, and you spend hours each week working distances that require the integration of wind, elevation, temperature, barometric pressure, and projectile ballistics into a solution that must be calculated in the time between acquiring a target and that target moving. You learn to read mirage through a spotting scope. You learn to call wind by the behavior of grass and dust and the surface of standing water. You are already a good shooter. The unit makes you a different kind of good, the kind that is consistent rather than occasional, repeatable rather than brilliant. The language training intensifies. Pashto, Arabic, not enough to pass for a native speaker, enough to understand the conversation in the next room, to know whether the raised voice is argument or alarm, to read the emotional register of a room before you enter it. 8 months into your time in the unit, you deploy to Iraq. Baghdad in the summer is a physical experience before it is anything else. The heat is not metaphorical, it is structural. It sits on your chest when you step off the aircraft, and it does not move for the entirety of your rotation. Your kit weighs 60 pounds in a climate designed to punish 60 pounds of kit. You sweat through your uniform before you reach the vehicle that takes you to the forward base camp, and you learn within a week the specific discipline of managing your body's water and salt balance as a tactical requirement rather than a comfort preference. The operations begin within days. Your first mission is a direct action raid on a mid-level insurgent facilitator in a neighborhood in eastern Baghdad. The intelligence package is solid. The planning is thorough. You have rehearsed the specific floor plan in a mock-up built to exact dimensions. The team is Reyes plus 3 others, plus you. The little bird drops you on the roof at 0200. Everything goes wrong within 30 seconds.
The roof access door, which the floor plan showed as opening inward, opens outward, a 3-second variance while Reyes adjusts the approach. The adjustment is automatic, trained, executed without discussion. But in those 3 seconds, the target's wife wakes up and her scream alerts the facilitator in the adjacent room, and by the time you breach the secondary door, he is moving toward a weapon on the bedside table. Reyes neutralizes the threat. The facilitator is secured. The mission continues. The intelligence exploitation of the site yields 2 laptops, 1 ledger, and 3 phones that will generate 6 follow-on targets over the next 10 days. In the debrief, Reyes takes the floor plan variants apart with the precision of a surgeon, not to assign blame, to understand the decision tree that would have produced a better outcome so that the next variance, and there is always a next variance, meets a team that has already thought through one version of it. You take notes on everything. You run 19 missions in 6 months. On mission 11, you make a mistake during a breach that creates a 2-second gap in coverage that Reyes fills by repositioning himself, exposing his flank in a way that doesn't cost anyone anything this time, but could have. He tells you in the debrief, quietly, without drama, exactly what you did and exactly when and exactly what it cost. He tells you once. He doesn't repeat it. He doesn't need to. That mistake never happens again. By mission 19, you are a different operator than you were on mission 1. Not dramatically different, not transformed in any visible way. The difference is in the tenths of seconds, in the decisions that used to require a fractional pause and now don't, in the way you read a room as you approach it, the information arriving and being processed and acted on in a cycle that has compressed from sequential to simultaneous. You rotate home. You are a staff sergeant, E6, within a year of your first deployment. The promotion is not a ceremony. It is a recognition that you have passed the point where the team needs to manage your development and reached the point where your development manages itself. You are no longer new. You are not yet experienced. You are in the space between, which is the most dangerous place to be because enough competence has accumulated to generate confidence and not enough has accumulated yet to know exactly where that confidence should stop. The unit's next training cycle begins in 4 days. You are in the gym at 0500 the morning after you land because the team trains and you are part of the team and the mission doesn't care about your jet lag.
The promotion to Sergeant First Class does not arrive with a changed title on your door, or a new desk, or a meeting where responsibilities are formally transferred. It arrives the way everything important in the unit arrives, quietly, practically, through the accumulation of trust until the day comes when the team sergeant says your name before a planning session, and the assumption in his voice is that you will run the brief. You run the brief. Your assault team is now your operational responsibility. 4 men who have between them 14 years of Delta experience, each one capable of operating independently at a level that would place them among the best soldiers in any conventional unit on Earth. Your job is not to tell them what to do. They know what to do. Your job is to build the decision framework for the mission, identify the variables that could collapse the plan, and create the conditions under which their capability has the maximum opportunity to produce the outcome the mission requires. This is a different kind of work than shooting. The planning cycle for a complex direct action mission takes 48 to 72 hours. You begin with the intelligence package, signals intercepts, human intelligence reports, pattern of life analysis documenting when the target moves and who he meets and what route he takes between the two. You study the package looking for assumptions. Every intelligence assessment contains assumptions, places where analysts have connected points with inference rather than evidence. Your job is to find those places, because those are the places where the plan breaks. You brief the troop commander. He is a major named Ackerman who was an operator for 8 years before commissioning and who combines the operational instincts of an experienced enlisted man with the strategic authority of an officer in a way that makes the relationship between you a partnership rather than a hierarchy. He pushes back on your assessments. He challenges contingency planning. He wants to know what happens if the vehicle checkpoint on the exfil route is manned when the pattern of life says it will be unmanned. You tell him. He nods. You own the plan. 3 months into your E7 tour, the troop deploys to Afghanistan. The operational environment in Afghanistan is different from Iraq in the way that mountains are different from flatlands, not just in physical character, but in the tactical logic that governs movement, observation, and threat assessment. In Baghdad, the threat was embedded in the urban fabric. In the Kunar Valley, the threat is the terrain itself. High ground, observation posts that can see movement in the valley floor from 20 kilometers, insurgent communication networks that create engagement zones where your options for response are limited by the walls of the valley before the first shot is fired. You plan accordingly. Mission 6 of this rotation is a hostage rescue. A contractor has been captured and is being held in a compound in the Petch River Valley. The intelligence window is narrow. The assessment says 72 hours before the target is moved to a secondary location in Pakistan that falls outside current operational authority. You have 48 hours to plan, rehearse, and execute. You build the plan in 20 hours.
The compound has 3 structures. The hostage is assessed as being held in the center building based on pattern of life thermal imaging. There are 11 armed guards. The exfil is a helicopter extraction from a clearing 400 meters northeast of the compound, 4 minutes of movement through terrain that offers limited cover. You run the rehearsal twice on a mock-up built by your engineers to the exact dimensions of the target compound. On the second rehearsal, one of your operators, a sergeant named Ochoa, 2 years in the unit, identifies a sight line from the western guard post that your plan had not accounted for. If the guard at that post is standing at the southern edge of his position rather than the northern edge, he has line of sight to the breach point 12 seconds before the element arrives. 12 seconds is enough time to alert the interior guards and compromise the hostage's safety. You rebuild that component of the plan. On the mission, the guard is at the northern edge of his position. The breach is clean. The hostage is located in the center building exactly where the intelligence said. He is alive. He is mobile. He is on the helicopter to the forward operating base 22 minutes after the little birds arrived over the compound. In the vehicle afterward, Ochoa is quiet in the way that operators are quiet after a clean mission, not celebrating, processing. You tell him his observation on the rehearsal was the difference in the plan. You tell him once, directly, without elaboration, because that is how you were told things that mattered, and that is how things that matter get transmitted in this world. He nods. 3 weeks later, he identifies another planning gap that you had missed. You are becoming a better planner because you have created conditions where the people around you are invested in the plan's quality rather than simply its execution. This is leadership in the unit, not authority, investment. You come home from this rotation with a body that has added 2 new entries to its damage log, a separated shoulder from a fast rope insertion that went wrong during a night operation on a mountain in Nuristan,
A hairline fracture in your right foot from a hard landing during a halo jump on a training evolution that preceded the deployment. The shoulder was treated in country. The foot you didn't report until you rotated home, because reporting it would have generated a medical review, and a medical review during an active rotation would have taken you off the mission schedule, and the mission schedule didn't have room for your absence. The unit's physician looks at the imaging of your foot with an expression that communicates what he thinks about operators who make these decisions. He treats you. He clears you for the next training cycle. He makes a note in your file that you are aware of and that you understand to be an accurate record of the choices you are making. You accept the prescription. You are back in the team room in 3 weeks. The E8 promotion takes 12 years and looks different from the outside than it feels from the inside. From the outside, a senior non-commissioned officer leading an assault team, coordinating with adjacent units, planning operations of significant complexity, carrying the rank of one of the most experienced and listed leaders in the most selective unit in the United States Army. From the inside, the specific weight of knowing that every decision you make in a planning room will be executed by men whose families exist under the assumption that your judgment is sound, and that the distance between sound judgment and the alternative is sometimes a single piece of information you didn't have, or a variable you didn't account for, or a timing window that closed 3 minutes before you accounted for it closing. You lead a team of 6 operators. The planning cycle has expanded in proportion to the complexity of the operations you are now assigned. As an E7, you plan single-objective direct action missions. As an E8, you are coordinating multi-objective operations where multiple teams hit multiple targets simultaneously, where the sequencing of those hits determines whether intelligence from the first target can be exploited before the network alerts and disperses, where the coordination with the 24th Special Tactics Squadron for fixed-wing fire support and the coordination with DevGru elements operating in an adjacent sector must be integrated into a single operational timeline that accounts for all of their individual requirements without creating conflicts that compromise any of them. You spend as many hours in front of maps and laptop screens as you spend in the shoot house. This is the job now. The direct action element, the breach, the clear, the sensitive site exploitation, that part is a small fraction of what an E8 actually does. The larger fraction is the cognitive work that makes the direct action element possible, that positions the team in the right place at the right time with the right information and the right support, so that the 11 seconds of kinetic action at the objective produces the outcome the operation was designed for. You are good at this. You are good at it because for 12 years you have been watching every person senior to you in this unit do this work, and you have been filing away every technique, every approach, every way of structuring a problem and dismantling it and rebuilding it into a plan that is honest about what it doesn't know. You have also been filing away every mistake you have witnessed, including your own, and the catalog of ways that plans fail has become a kind of negative template that you apply to everything you build, not to prevent failure, because failure cannot be prevented, but to ensure that when it arrives in a form you have already anticipated and built a response to. 6 months into your E8 tour, your team deploys to Somalia. Somalia is different from every other environment you have operated in. Not harder, different. The threat architecture is decentralized in a way that Iraq and Afghanistan's were not. There is no fixed infrastructure, no pattern of life that holds for more than a few days before the target adapts it. The intelligence cycle that produces actionable targeting packages is shorter and less certain, which means the planning window is compressed and the assumptions embedded in the intelligence package are less reliable. You adjust. Your first operation in country is a capture mission against a senior al-Shabaab logistics coordinator who has been moving weapons and personnel across the border with Kenya. The intelligence package is 48 hours old by the time you brief the mission. In Afghanistan, a 48-hour package on a static compound would be acceptable. In Somalia, 48 hours might as well be a different intelligence picture entirely. You tell Ackerman, now a lieutenant colonel, that the package has a shelf life problem. He asks what you recommend. You recommend a 24-hour surveillance window before the mission to confirm the target is still in the location assessed. The surveillance is approved. The target is confirmed at the location 12 hours before mission execution.
The operation is clean, but it is the conversation with Ackerman that stays with you, not because of its content, but because of what it represents. The moment when your assessment of an operational risk was treated not as a subordinate's input, but as the professional judgment of the person best positioned to evaluate it. This is what E8 actually means in the unit, not the rank, the relationship, the weight your words carry in a planning room, which is a weight built from 12 years of being right about the things that matter and honest about the things you don't know. You come home from Somalia with a troop sergeant major slot waiting for you. Before you take it, you sit in the team room with Ochoa, who is an E7 now and running his own brief, and you tell him what you have learned about planning that cannot be taught in the OTC, about the assumptions inside intelligence packages and how to find them, about the specific sight lines that get people killed in operations that look clean on paper, about the weight of the decisions that happen in the 48 hours before the little birds take off, when everything is still theoretical and changeable, versus the decisions that happen in the 11 seconds when nothing is. You tell him once, directly, without elaboration. He takes notes on everything. You recognize the motion. You have been in the unit for 17 years. Your left knee has had 2 surgeries. Your right shoulder has been reconstructed once. Your hearing across both ears carries deficits in the high-frequency range that the VA will document and categorize, and that you will manage with the same strategic indifference with which you have managed every physical cost this career has produced. Your lower back locks in cold weather and on mornings after long flights, and you have learned the specific stretching sequence that unlocks it in about 4 minutes, which you do quietly in whatever bathroom is available, before anyone sees you move like a man 17 years older than your actual age. You are not done. Sergeant Major. The title is the Army's recognition that you have reached the top of the enlisted structure in the most demanding military unit in the world. There are very few E9s in the entirety of 1st SFOD-D. Each one is a library of operations, decisions, mistakes, corrections, losses, and accumulated judgment that took 17 years to build and cannot be replicated or accelerated or transferred through any mechanism other than time and proximity. You are no longer on the assault element. You miss it every day. Not the physical experience of it. Your body, if it were being honest, does not miss the fast ropes and the hard landings and the 60 pounds of kit in the Afghan summer. What you miss is the clarity. The operational moment has a simplicity that nothing else in your life has ever replicated. You have a problem with a geometric solution, and the training to find it, and the team to execute it, and the only input required is your best judgment, applied with maximum commitment. The sergeant major role has no such clarity. You oversee the entire assault troop, 40 operators at various stages of their development. You know each of them with the specific intimacy that comes from watching people perform under conditions that reveal character rather than conceal it. You know who will make the correct decision when the plan breaks and who will hesitate. You know who has the tactical instincts to improvise and who needs the structure of a prepared plan to perform at their highest level. You know who is carrying something they haven't processed and how it is showing up in the team room in ways they don't know you can see. This knowledge is your primary operational tool. The troop commander is a lieutenant colonel named Harris who came up through the conventional army and commissioned into special forces before selection. He is smart. He is tactically competent. He does not have 17 years of direct action experience in this unit. He has 3. He understands this. He uses it correctly, which means he uses you correctly, not as a subordinate who executes his decisions, but as the institutional knowledge base against which his decisions are tested before they become plans. You sit in every planning session. You listen for the assumptions. You listen for the places where the optimism in the plan has outrun the intelligence supporting it. You listen for the timeline compressions that remove contingency options before the mission has even begun. When you find these places, you say what you see.
You do not soften it. You do not hedge it. You have spent 17 years building the credibility to speak plainly in planning rooms, and you use that credibility the way you use everything that unit has given you, for the mission, which ultimately means for the men. Harris listens. Not always at first. There is a mission in the 4th month of your E9 tour, a time-sensitive target in eastern Syria, a high-value Islamic State facilitator who has a 48-hour intelligence window before he crosses into Turkey, that you tell Harris the exfil route has a vehicle checkpoint problem that the current plan addresses with an assumption about Syrian Democratic Forces coverage that is not confirmed. You recommend a secondary exfil be planned and rehearsed. Harris says the primary route has been used 3 times without incident. You say that the 4th time will be the one where the incident occurs if the coverage assumption is wrong. He approves the secondary route. The primary checkpoint is manned on mission night with a vehicle that does not belong to the SDF. The team uses the secondary route. Everyone comes home. Harris does not say, "Told you so," to you. You do not say, "Told you so," to Harris. The debrief addresses the intelligence failure on the checkpoint, the decision-making that produced the secondary route, and the updated planning protocol that will require confirmed coverage rather than assumed coverage on all exfil routes going forward. The lesson becomes doctrine. That is what you are now, a lesson-making machine. 17 years of what works and what doesn't, translated into planning protocols and training adjustments and the quiet corrections delivered to E6s and E7s in team rooms and debrief rooms that will shape their decision-making for the rest of their careers, which will shape the decision-making of the men they train, in a transmission that extends beyond anything you will ever directly witness.
There was a night, there is always a night in this life, where everything that has been accumulating for 17 years finally presents its full bill at once. You are at home, stateside. Your daughter is 16 and she has a school performance, and you are sitting in an auditorium that smells like floor wax and cafeteria food, and she is on the stage. You are there. Your body is in the seat, and your hands are in your lap, and your eyes are oriented toward the stage. But for 45 minutes, you are in Paktia province. You were in the Kunar Valley. You were in the vehicle in Kandahar where your teammate Garrett's blood was on your hands and the medevac was 7 minutes out, and you told him too. You are in every room you have ever cleared and every plan you have ever built and every debrief where you reconstructed the moment someone's teammate didn't come home and tried to find the decision that would have changed the outcome. Your daughter finds you afterward. Her face is open and glad, and she asks what you thought. You tell her she was extraordinary, which is true, you mean it, and you were not there, which is the truth underneath everything else. Your wife stands to the side and watches the exchange. She has been watching exchanges like this for 15 years. She understood what the unit would cost before you did, and she has paid the price of that understanding in a currency that has no name in any military compensation structure, in the years of single parenthood during your rotations, in the birthdays attended by phone call from a fire base, in the specific adjustment that happens in a household when the person who is supposed to be present is structurally absent, and the household must reorganize itself around that absence and then reorganize again when the person returns. She loves you. She is not always certain she knows you. After she falls asleep that night, you sit in the kitchen with the lights off and you try to calculate, honestly, what this career has cost the people closest to you. The number does not arrive in units you can measure. It arrives as images. Your son's face at age 9 when he stopped expecting you at his games and started being surprised when you came. Your daughter asking once, when she was 7, whether your job was to protect people, and you said yes, and she said, "Then why do you leave us?" You do not have a clean answer for that question. You have the only answer you have ever had, which is that the two things are connected, that the leaving and the protecting are the same action seen from different positions, and that the position you were standing in required you to see it from one direction, while the people you love saw it from the other. Whether that is true or whether it is a story you have told yourself for 17 years to make the math work, you can no longer determine with certainty. Both possibilities live in the kitchen with you.
Not every senior operator stays enlisted. Some make the decision to commission. It is not a common path in the unit, but it is an available one, and the men who take it do so understanding that they are trading one kind of authority for another, trading the authority of a man who has done everything for the authority of a man who is now responsible for everything. As a captain, you are a troop commander. 60 operators fall under your command. Your job is no longer the plan. Your job is the environment in which planning happens. You resource the training cycle. You manage the relationship with the intelligence community that produces the targeting packages your operators execute. You sit across the table from agency representatives and explain what your unit needs from them and listen to what they need from the unit in return and translate between those two languages, which are not naturally compatible. The missions are yours to authorize or decline. This is the weight that no OTC prepares you for. The mission profile is sound, the intelligence is solid, the team is trained. You signed the operation order. Your name goes on the document. If every variable falls where the assessment says it will, everyone comes home, and the target is either captured or neutralized, and the operation adds another data point to the network map that the intelligence community will use to generate the next target package. If one variable doesn't fall where the assessment says it will, the phone rings, and the voice on the other end is the unit's medical officer, and the word down means something has ended that cannot be restarted. You sign every operation order, understanding that probability and outcome are different things, and that the space between them is the space where the worst things happen. As a major, you move to a staff position at the group level. You are no longer running a troop. You are contributing to the planning and resourcing of multiple troops across multiple theaters simultaneously. The operational picture expands. The granularity decreases. You see less of each mission and more of the pattern of missions over time, the strategic shape of the unit's work across a 12-month period, rather than the tactical shape of a specific operation on a specific night. You miss the tactical granularity the way you miss the assault element, not the physical part, but the clarity. At the troop level, you could see the problem and touch its edges. At the staff level, you are working on problems whose edges are somewhere beyond the frame of the picture in front of you. You adjust. As a lieutenant colonel, you command a SEAL team or are attached to a Joint Special Operations Task Force where your unit provides the direct action element in a larger intelligence-driven targeting operation. You are in rooms with CIA station chiefs and DIA intelligence analysts and JSOC planners who are coordinating activities across multiple countries simultaneously. The conversations are conducted in a language of euphemisms and classification levels and interagency equities that is its own kind of code, and learning it takes as long as learning the physical code of the shoot house took, and the consequences of misreading it are just as real, though they play out in policy outcomes rather than in compounds. Your phone rings at 0300 with a regularity that becomes its own kind of background noise. You make the calls, you manage the crises, you write the letters. Then you go to work the next morning and do it again. The day comes, not dramatically, not with a clear before and after. It arrives like the end of a long road trip. You look up at some point and realize the landscape has changed and you have crossed into somewhere new without noticing the exact moment of crossing. 20+ years, somewhere between 8 and 12 combat deployments, depending on how you count the short rotations and the temporary duty assignments. A body that is given what it has to give at this operational level and that now requires management rather than operation. A file full of awards with citations that describe actions in places the citations are careful not to specifically name.
The retirement process in the Army is bureaucratic and unhurried, and treats the end of a special operations career with the same administrative indifference it treats the end of any career, which is its own kind of final lesson about institutions. You process out. The options on the other side of the gate are real, and they are various. Some operators go to the intelligence community. The CIA's Special Activities Center, Ground Branch specifically, draws heavily from Delta and SEAL Team 6 because the work is recognizable. Direct action in denied areas, liaison with foreign partners, operations that the government will not acknowledge. The difference is the absence of the uniformed structure. No ranks, no unit crest, a different kind of institutional culture that values the same skills in a framework built around deniability rather than military doctrine. Some go to private security. The market for former Delta operators in the executive protection and high-risk environment security sector is real, and it pays in a register that military compensation never approached. You might find yourself managing security for a tech executive in a country where the threat environment requires the kind of assessment and response planning that is structurally not that different from the operational planning you did in the unit, minus the targeting authority and plus a client who asks questions about the threat level during dinner. Some go to training commands. Fort Liberty has positions for experienced operators who want to transmit what they know to the next generation of candidates working through selection and OTC. This is the work that extends your actual operational life beyond your physical operational life. The knowledge you carry, encoded into the muscle memory and decision architecture of operators who will be going through doors in Paktia Province and the Kunar Valley and places that don't yet have names on operational maps for the next 20 years. Some do nothing for a while. 6 months, a year. The nervous system needs time to understand that the absence of threat is not itself a threat. And that understanding takes longer than most people who haven't experienced it would predict, and shorter than it feels from inside. Whatever you choose, the mornings are different. For 20 years, the morning had a fixed architecture. Mission, training, the operational cycle that gave every day a function and every function a purpose that extended beyond the personal. The morning in retirement has no fixed architecture. It is simply morning, time that belongs to you in a way that time has not belonged to you since before you drove to Fort Benning at 22 years old and stood in the dark at 04:30 and began the process of becoming something other than yourself. Learning to live inside that morning is the last mission. It is also the hardest one. There's a specific accounting that happens, eventually, with everyone who has lived this life. Not in a dramatic moment, in quiet ones, in the kitchen at 0300 when the family is asleep, in the car driving to a grocery store with a card and a list and no tactical objective and nothing at stake, in the specific silence of a suburban afternoon that sounds nothing like the silence after a clean exfil, but that your nervous system, trained for 17 years to treat silence as information, cannot process as neutral. You spent 20-plus years in a unit that the Army officially acknowledges, while simultaneously saying almost nothing about its operations, its personnel, or its methods. You attended events where someone asked what you do for a living, and you said something vague about Army support roles, and watched their eyes move on to the next person. And that invisibility was a professional requirement that became a personal habit, and then, over time, became something harder to name, a distance between who you are and what you can say about who you are that never fully closes. The men you served with are the most capable human beings you have ever encountered. They are also the most damaged, and also the most loyal. These three things exist in the same people simultaneously, because extreme performance under extreme conditions produces extreme everything, including the parts that don't appear in any recruitment narrative and that don't get addressed in any transition assistance program, and that you will spend years learning to carry in a way that doesn't compromise the life you're building in ordinary time. The names of the men who didn't come home stay with you. Not as trauma, exactly, as presence. They are simply there, in the room with you, the way people you love are there even when they are not physically present, their weight felt in the space they would have occupied.
You carry them with you into the ordinary mornings and the grocery stores and the school performances where your daughter is on stage and you are in your seat, and the accounting happens quietly in the gap between where you are and where part of you will always be. You don't regret it. Regret requires an alternative timeline, and you have never been able to construct one that felt like your life. This was your life. The selection course in the West Virginia mountains at hour 17, moving through the dark with 65 pounds and a compass and no signal from anyone whether you were doing it right. The first breach, the first loss, the debrief rooms and the planning rooms, and the conversations at 0500 in the team room that weren't on any training schedule, but were where the actual transmission of knowledge happened. The auditorium that smelled like floor wax, the birthday attended by phone from a fire base, the flag folded with hands that did not shake. All of it. The little bird has no doors because doors add weight, and weight reduces speed, and speed determines whether 11 men make it home or 10 do. You understood that trade the first time you felt the cold air at altitude. You made it every time, without hesitation. That is the only definition of this life that has ever made complete sense to you, and it is the only one that ever will.